City Council of Monday, September 11th, 2017. At this time, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Lane is absent. Councilmember Durossette.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kline.
Here.
Councilmember Ryno.
Here.
And Mayor Vierra.
Here. Next, we will have the invocation. This evening, it was supposed to be Pastor Adrian Condit, but it looks like he won't be with us. So we have Jeff Hilbert of the Believers Family Church, please.
During the September 11th attacks in 2001, 2,996 people, they were killed and more than 6,000 others wounded in the Twin Towers, Pentagon, and the aircraft used to perpetrate the terrorist act. Civilians from 90 different nations perished along with 343 heroic firefighters, 71 brave enforcement officers, and 55 courageous military personnel. The toll continues to climb as many die due to the effects of that day. I ask that you join me for a moment of silence to honor the lost, followed by the ringing of the honor bell and invocation. Heavenly Father, you are our hope and you're our refuge. Father, as a nation, we're mindful of this day, and we're thankful that today we're taking breath, and we're able to take a moment and work on behalf of our citizens in this city. And we thank you, Lord, for our firefighters. We thank you, Lord, for our officers. And we thank you, Lord, for the soldiers that protect us. We ask that you watch over our city council tonight. Give them guidance as we seek yours. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This evening we have a couple of presentations. The first is a presentation by the Valley Vision Stanislaus with an update to the Regional Transportation Plan and the Sustainable Community Strategy.
Oh, hello. Good morning, or good evening, everyone. My name is Kendall Flint. I'm with Regional Government Services, and I'm part of the consultant team that's working with the Stanislaus Council of Governments on the update to its Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. And we're kind of looking the same umbrella as we did 5 years ago, of Stanislaus Valley Vision. What I'm going to be doing tonight is basically going over briefly the program, the way that this is going to be rolling out over the next several months, and opportunities for engagement. As you know, people move through Stanislaus County in a variety of different ways. Some are very reliant on our bus system. ACE trains are coming. There's a lot of excitement about that, given SB 132 and the funding that came through. Many of our residents and folks are really liking to use bicycle trails. Millions are taking to the roads through 99, 5, and a number of our other connectors. We've got a growing population that's using services to connect them to services for medical and other types of appointments. And then, of course, we have the delivery of goods and services from our agricultural community, whether that's taking them to market or taking them for processing and whatnot. So what Valley Vision Stanislaus through the RTPSCS does is sets forth a plan to look over the next 25 years of all of the investments in transportation that'll be made by all 10 agencies. That includes the city of Ceres, as well as all our other cities here and the county. This is a required document from the federal government that has to be produced every 4 years. And what they do is they look at this and try to figure out how the region is going to adapt and plan for its long-range transportation goals. It should reflect the vision of all of the member agencies, all the cities, as well as the county. And of course, it wants to link transportation investments to land use, housing, jobs, employment, this sort of thing. Now, what the plan must do is provide a prioritized list of projects. What that means is that you have to take a look at everything from roadway improvements to additional transit services, whether it's active transportation, anything and everything that's going to be relating to transportation. It has to be fiscally constrained, which means all the projects and programs that are in the plan have to be fully funded. And what's really great is that this time around, as opposed to 4 years ago, with the passage of Measure L and the state with the SB1, we actually have some money to do some implementation, whereas previously it was going to be a little bit trickier. It continues to have to meet greenhouse gas emission reduction standards that are set by the state, as well as compliance with all existing state and federal laws. That includes, of course, the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and of course, environmental justice, which means making sure that we are, in fact, looking at all the various populations through the area and not burdening anyone. As I mentioned, we're coordinating this effort with housing land use. So that means we are looking at the already adopted housing elements for all of the agencies and the regional housing needs. We're looking at the statewide transportation plan and all these other pieces that have already been presented or have already been planned out. Two areas I want to draw your attention to: social equity and, of course, in healthy communities. These are goals that basically set out a path so that we're making sure that we're creating opportunities for people to get out of their vehicles and walk or bike or whatever it is to be healthier, and then also to take a look at social equity to make sure that as we do these investments, that they are fair to all folks within the county, regardless of socioeconomic status. Mentioned a moment ago, SB 375. Last time we did the regional transportation plan, we heard sustainable community strategy for the first time. So we've actually gone through this process once, so have all the other MPOs in the state. This is the second time we're doing it. And I just want to point out that this does not supersede the local land use authority here in Ceres. And so as an example, you're in the middle of your general plan update, which I think you're going to be hearing a little bit more about tonight. So our folks are obviously working with your planning team and your planning staff to find out what direction Ceres is going in so that we can incorporate that information into the plan as it is updated. So as you can see here, this has all the various cities that are there. This is a quick map of all of the projects that were included in Measure L, and they're all going to be in the regional transportation plan. So anything that is part of that is moving forward. StanCog is working very hard to try to get this information out to as many folks as possible, which means our public outreach program, once again, is pretty comprehensive. I think I ran into a couple Rotarians here tonight. We'll be out seeing them in the coming weeks, as well as the chamber, senior centers. We've been at farmers markets. We've been going out into the community to make sure we're hitting churches, schools, colleges, and get as many people involved as possible. This effort goes forward to develop 4 scenarios. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. As I mentioned, because we have Measure L, because we have SB1, this is several $billion more coming into this area than there was 4 years ago. So that has a dramatic effect on the number and the types of projects that can be included in the plan. At this point, we're in what we call the analysis portion of the program. So the team has been putting together possible scenarios based on the public input and based on the information that has been given to us from your planning staff, your management, so that we can look and see what all the jurisdictions are going to be doing moving forward. Next month, we're going to come back with 4 scenarios, and each of the scenarios are essentially investment packages that are grouped almost like a theme. So you might have one that is more emphasis on rail, train, or bus services. You might have another one that is more concentrated in investments in the urban core. You might find another one that is more in tune with additional roadway improvement projects. And that'll be up to the StanCog board as well as all of you to weigh in and tell us what you would like. Once we come up with a preferred scenario, that will move forward through the environmental review process. We anticipate that taking through basically June of next year, and then to get through the whole process, we're probably looking at an adoption sometime at late 2018. So once the scenarios are developed, they're measured in two ways. One is by a technical analysis, which looks at these goals, mobility and accessibility, which is basically the ability for folks to get from point A to point B, and whether that's moving goods and services, kids to school, getting you to church, whatever it might be, making sure that all folks have access to adequate transportation options in their area. Social equity, ensuring that that access is not discriminatory based on race, sex, income, or anything else. Economic and community vitality, this really is the idea that when we have transportation investments, we want to put them in places, communities, and locations that are going to spur economic growth or enhance existing economic programs, like the ability to deliver goods and services to market or creating more jobs. When we look at sustainable development pattern, that's really taking a look at how these investments would affect land use in terms of agricultural and open space. We want to keep as much of that as possible because we are an agricultural community, and it's very important for folks to make sure that that's going to be maintained. Environmental quality, all the scenarios we looked at in terms of how they affect the natural environment. That's air quality, water quality, light, noise, all the various things that you look at in environmental review. Safety and health, exactly what it sounds like, more emphasis on safer roads, safer passages, both for pedestrians as well as for cars. And then general health, if we're getting more people out biking and walking, that's great. And also system preservation. Now, that would be the ability of the plan to maintain what we already have, the existing transportation network, and that includes both roadways as well as transit services. Now, the last time we did this, we had 4 scenarios and actually wound up going with scenario number 3, which was a slightly more compact development and greater emphasis on infill than we had perhaps in previous years. This has been a good plan for us thus far. We were able to meet our greenhouse gas emissions targets. Those have gone up slightly, and so the challenge this time is to make sure that we can, in fact, meet those numbers again, which are slightly up by about a percentage point. So we'll be having these workshops again in October to select the scenarios and let the public weigh in, because while we have the technical analysis this way, we also want to hear from the public about what they feel would be the best thing to do. And to that end, obviously we're making presentations here at all the council meetings as well as community groups. We have over 30 that are scheduled over the next month or so, and we anticipate more in the coming months as well. We also have a series of online surveys, so if people are unable to come to either a council meeting, one of our presentations, or workshops, they can listen to and participate online so they can weigh in with their comments, suggestions, concerns, and that particular virtual workshop is also bilingual so people can participate in the language of their choice. As I mentioned, we're obviously talking to a lot of folks in terms of groups. Now, our next 3 workshops, one of them actually is here in series. The first one is going to be on the 16th, and that's going to be at October 16th at 6:30 p.m. at the Newman City Council Chambers. The next one is October 26th, which will be here at the Ceres Community Center, also at 6:30. And our final for that round will be November 6th, and that is at the City of Modesto in the library auditorium downstairs. The website, there are 2 ways to get there. You can go to stancog.org, or you can go to valleyvisionstanislaus.org. Both sites contain all the information about the process, news articles that have been written about it, the surveys themselves, supporting documents, frequently asked questions, project overviews, and it will be the housing for any and all interim documents that are produced as part of this process. Both my number, Kendall Flint, and our project manager for StanCog, Elizabeth Hahn, our contact information is there as well, and anybody can call or email either one of us or send something through the website in terms of asking for clarification, more information, or if there's a community group out there that would like a presentation or like more information to their members, we are ready, willing, and able to do that. So that really concludes my presentation, although I am available for any questions. And also with me tonight is Executive Director Rosa de Leon Park, so the Director of StanCog. I think you might have seen her in here a couple times. So with that, I'm available to take any questions.
Does anyone on the council have any
I do have a
questions?
question. How does this affect the local jurisdictions and their Measure L money that's allocated to them?
So let's do it in two parts. For example, Ceres already has in the regional projects that major intersection. That's in on any scenario. So anything that's in L, any scenario goes. All of your projects and programs that have been suggested by L, that would be your road maintenance projects, your traffic lights, all of that stuff, anything that was L related is also in the plan. So that will all be the same. Where you have some flexibility now is the additional funds coming in from SB1 and just the prioritization of which way you want to go in which order. But your Public Works Department and City Manager will be driving that list. We're not figuring it out for you. You're telling us what you want to do.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that it does not affect what the City of Ceres allegation is.
Right. No, and in fact, what's great about it is once you have an adopted RTP-SCS, in addition to the leverages you can get from Measure L money, having all these projects in your adopted regional, or the region's adopted regional transportation plan, it's like another document that makes you that much more attractive for leveraging additional funds for your projects moving forward.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next presentation we have this evening is the water tower restoration efforts.
This one is unavailable.
Good evening, Vierra, Durossette, Ryno, please out. I did give each of you sort of a brief report of.
Just wait. He needs their presentation anyway. If you want, there's a mic up there as well.
That's a bummer. Okay. Well, in front of you, then you have the presentation, so we'll have to go through it page by page. So what happened was several weeks ago, I was speaking to another citizen about the water tower, and we both were in agreement that it needs some work. And I had mentioned that I would like to try to form a group of citizens who could maybe come up with some ideas to work on preserving the water tower. My personal reason, when I leave my office every night, as I'm walking out to my car, I consider the water tower to be my moon. It's kind of, as I walk out, it's right there in the sky, and to me that tells me I'm leaving, I'm going home for the night, and it's sort of a peaceful image that I like to enjoy. Most people I've talked to since then has compared the water tower to an iconic landmark, and I was actually quite surprised when we started discussing it and just putting a little comments and things on Facebook, how many people are interested in preserving the water tower. And so we decided to have a community meeting, a citizen meeting, that was on August 29th to find out some brainstorming ideas, get some information, and come to present to you today. So on the first page, there's a little bit of a brief history of the water tower, which I'm sure you probably already know, but for the benefit of everybody else. So the water tower was built in 1934 by the Chicago Bridge and Iron Works for $20,000. It's currently located on 6th Street near Lawrence Street. It currently sits on the City of Ceres property. For over 50 years, it carried 50,000 gallons of water storage. It no longer carries water, but it has become an iconic landmark for the City of Ceres. Unfortunately, we've also been told it has a few bullet holes in it as well. So putting water in it right now would not be a good idea. In 2002, the American flag and the name were painted on the tower. The cost for that was $5,000. City Council approved the funding on January 14th, 2002. Before the current water tower was built, Ceres actually had a wooden tower that was located downtown called the Joe Vincent Wooden Water Tower. And there's a picture of it there in your packet. In October 2010, an estimate was given by the Cornerstone Company for repairs in the amount of $450,000. Huge difference from $20,000 to $450,000. These costs include analysis and testing, plans, specs, and estimate, structural repairs, repainting, project management, and inspections. On August 22nd, Sheila Brandt and I met with City Manager Toby Wells and discussed the history of the water tower, and we then asked to be put on the agenda for this evening. August 29th was when we met with our group of citizens to gather support, raise interest, and brainstorm. Current repairs for the water tower with the updated cost, according to our city manager and some research, since it was 2010 was the last estimate, current cost would be upward of $530,000 approximately. The tower itself needs to be updated for structural stability and reinforcement. The existing paint is a lead-based paint. It needs to be removed before fresh paint can be used. The tower will need to be shrouded during this time to keep the lead-based paint from entering the environment. There's also a school across the street, so of course that's our first priority. The rust needs to be treated before any repairs can be done. My estimated goal to raise the funds for this is 3 to 5 years. I know it's not going to happen tomorrow. I wish it would, but it can't. So I've put a time mark of 3 to 5 years. That's a lot of funding, $530,000 for a group of people. I had quite a few people kind of joke with me how I'm going to come up with $500,000 to save the tower. Well, I think it's going to be possible. I really do. I wouldn't be here tonight if I didn't think it was possible. Some of the ideas that we have are federal or state grants. I have a meeting on Thursday with someone who has done grants, written grants, and we're going to discuss different options for grants and how we can apply for them. I would like to apply for a historical landmark. Now, I've looked into this. There's not a lot of towers considered historical landmarks because the guidelines to be a historical landmark means you have to have an event that happened at that location that is historic, possibly museums or war zones, things like that. I mean, there's different forts. There's all kinds of various different landmarks that are out there, but not a lot of water towers. However, there are a few. And for us, because of the tower being built in 1934, that puts us in the line for becoming a landmark because of the era, 1934. It is a Depression era. It was during the Roosevelt administration, and so using that, we can move forward to apply for a landmark. We also want to look for private fundraising. One idea that I have is to build some sort of a monument or a wall that would engrave names of people who donate. I've talked to a company in Turlock that does monuments for memorials, and they're getting us prices to see how much it would cost to do a small wall with the names of the people who have donated. Very similar to the idea of the bricks in the community center. My family has a brick, very proudly displayed on the back patio of the community center. So it's a similar idea. You would purchase or donate to have your name put in next to the tower. Also donation accounts, GoFundMe, support the tower, etc. Annual fundraisers. One that came up was a vintage trailer show. We also are looking into dinners, golf tournaments, etc. Most of you know I'm very familiar with fundraising for nonprofit organizations. Annual fundraisers, corporate sponsorships, and local companies. Another fundraiser that came up at our citizen meeting, was a time capsule. If families or citizens in the community would like to buy a slot in the time capsule to put a family memorabilia or something like that, have it buried. I actually am a little familiar with that as well because during our Boy Scout years, we did do a time capsule at Carroll Fowler. You do have to register it. You do have to get the coordinates for it. But I already know how to do all of that. So that's another option that we could do is put a time capsule under the property. My biggest fundraiser that I think is going to work the best, I think is going to be our annual drive, 3 years with donations, private donations. If we can receive donations from 2,500 people at $225 per person, that's over $500,000. I've already had, since this has been in the media, I've already had several people call me and said they would write me a check. I can't take a check yet, so we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think it's doable. There's 45,000 people in the city of Ceres. If half the people in the city don't even know the tower exists, that's 20,000. Out of that 20,000, 10,000 knows it exists but may not have the money. You get down to 5,000, they may not have the money, they're going paycheck to paycheck, give it down to half, 2,500. I think we can reach 2,500 people to pay $225. Now, receiving money. We can't just receive money as citizens. However, I do have an appointment with the Community Foundation, and several members of the Community Foundation have agreed to allow me to come and do a presentation, and possibly they would represent us as a nonprofit. That would put us in a nonprofit status. We would be able to set up an account through the Community Foundation, and all the monies would be filtered through them. I think the timing right now is right. I know this has been talked about for many years, but with the downtown revitalization and the centennial coming up next year, what better time do we have to preserve our water tower? Now, there's also the issue of expense. You can't raise money without spending money. So another idea that came up at our citizen meeting, we had, surprising to us, we had no idea that they were going to do this, but we had several members who came and wore shirts, t-shirts, that had a picture of the water tower on it. We even had a young man named Felipe Martinez who came and had a tattoo on his calf. Obviously it means a lot to him. Come to find out, his aunt is the one who created the t-shirt, and she is willing to continue creating t-shirts to support this cause. She's actually given us 2 designs of t-shirts, and I spoke with somebody else about the cost of getting bulk t-shirts, and she would do the printing on it. We want to try to keep it local if we can. And all of the money that we raise by selling t-shirts will go for the expenses, such as making copies, possibly sharing the billboard, any advertisement or marketing that we want to do to try to preserve the water tower. The reason I want to do this is so that 100% of money that's donated to the water tower goes to the water tower, not part to expenses or costs. I want, if somebody writes me a check for the water tower to preserve it, it'll go to the account to preserve the water tower. And I did put a copy of the designs in there that she made. What I didn't include in your packet, because I was going to have it up on the PowerPoint, are pages and pages and pages of water towers throughout the country. There's quite a few. If you've ever driven through the country, most towns, as you drive through them off the freeway or off the roads, they are marked by their water towers. And one thing I didn't know until I started doing my research is that a lot of our colleges in the state of California also have their own water towers. UC Davis, CSU Fresno, they have their water towers as well. They're all over the country, every state. One of our citizens in Sirius just did a cross-country trip, and she took pictures and posted them on Facebook of every water tower she saw along the way. There's unique ones. This one looks like a teacup. There's one that looks like a golf ball. So they're all over, pages and pages and pages. City of Modesto, CSU Fresno. They're even worldwide. I thought I would show you France and Germany. This one's actually a museum with a water tower at the top. It's very beautiful, actually. One for the state of California, and of course you can't forget Disneyland. On the back pages, there is some contact information. So I'm not doing this by myself. Oh, there they are. I didn't. She left. So there's contact information for myself. If you can't reach me, my husband, also Sheila and Lee Brandt have jumped on board as well. Their contact information. Lee did create a email for anybody who wants information. It's serieswatertower@gmail.com. And then I created a Facebook page, since everybody's social media these days, that just says Ceres Water Tower. And then I added, at the last minute to your packet, there are other organizations, citizen organizations or citizen ad hoc committees who are out there. There's one in New Jersey that's currently doing the same thing we are, trying to raise money as citizens. I put a copy in your packet there. I think it's dated October. They're doing a flea market fundraiser for their tower. And then also, I don't know if you got a copy of this. I think it was really passed out, but I think hopefully you got the copy up there. This is Chico, and they're also doing the same thing. There's actually many, many citizen organizations out there right now who are in the same boat as us and trying to raise money for their water towers. And I have the documentation if anybody wants that. What would you like to add?
Just, you know my feelings on the water tower. Thousands of people go down 99 every single day, and they see our water all done. And then we've got our water tower, and she's pitiful. She needs work. And we know the city does not have the money for it. We're not even suggesting that. But she does need work.
Well, we're supportive of your efforts, and what if you can come up with the money to do that, we would be more than happy to refurbish the water tower, so the only advice I would give you as you embark on this project, make sure that your accountability is very stringent, because the citizens will want to make sure of that 3 and 5 years down the road if perhaps you don't meet the goal or something and the funding is there. So that would be the only advice I'd give you. But I think I speak for my colleagues up here. We're supportive of what you're doing, and we're hopeful that you get to the finish line.
Thank you.
So.
Just on that note, I did find a database, and I've already put the volunteers who came to the meeting in there. We will be adding anybody who donates to that database. So there will be full record of anybody who's donated, so that by 2023, if we haven't made any efforts,
Okay.
then they'll get their money back.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Any other comments? Good luck.
We'll need it.
When you
We've got
get-
a challenge.
When you get done with this one, we have a few more we would love for you to take on. So.
Challenge accepted.
All right.
Like Randy said, the timing's perfect.
Yeah.
With all of the upgrades that we've done in the city, I mean, look at the overpass, has been done, And now that, we're talking about the water tower, you guys are gonna notice a lot more. You're gonna be in different spots where you see that water tower. Prevalent. Like Sheila said, we're not asking the city to put in a dime. We're just asking for permission
Mm-hmm.
to do it. Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
We'll be hitting you up, so.
Sure you will.
All right. Next, we'll move on to citizens' communication to council on matters not included on the agenda. While the City Council welcomes and encourages participation in City Council meetings, adopted rules allow no more than 5 minutes for expression of non-agenda items. Matters under the jurisdiction of the City Council and not on the posted agenda may be addressed by the general public. However, California law prohibits the City Council from taking action on any matter which is not on the posted agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the City Council. Citizens are entitled to address the City Council on any agenda item subject to the 5-minute provision. At this time, I will go ahead and we have a couple of, let's see, those are items. We have one speaker card, and it's from Lourdes Perez.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Lourdes Perez. I am here on behalf of Center for Human Services, Ceres Partnership Family Resource Center, located at 1317 Grandview Avenue in Ceres. And I am here to respectfully request an opportunity to present information on a Healthy by Default campaign to this council. I hope that you consider this for a near future agenda or presentation as a study item. The City of Ceres adopted a Healthy Eating, Active Living, Heal Cities resolution in 2012 as a commitment to embrace policies that facilitate and promote healthier lifestyles for obesity prevention in this city. We ask that you take a step further ahead to create a policy that will support the commitment this council made in 2012. Just a quick few facts. In Stanislaus County, 1 in 6 children are overweight for their age, 26% higher than the California average. There are 14 chain restaurants that already have a voluntary policy that with a default beverage to include water or low-fat milk with their kids' meal. There are several of these chain restaurants within the City of Ceres limits, to mention some: McDonald's, Jack in the Box, Wendy's, Subway, Burger King, and others. Healthy by Default is a law to change the social norm with healthy beverages to be the default beverage in kids' meals. The fact that there are 14 chain restaurants that already have this voluntary policy in place shows that this approach is feasible and for businesses, and it's likely to become an easy transition with the largest impact to improve our children's health. We've also conducted surveys with restaurant owners here locally, And we have conducted educational outreach to various groups to garner support of this initiative. This includes the Heart Coalition, Seroptimus, Center for Human Services, Ceres Unified School Districts, and many others, and also reaching over 500 individuals and obtaining letters of support and support cards from citizens of Ceres. The council has a powerful role to play in protecting the citizens of Ceres by making the healthy choice the easy choice. We ask that the City of Ceres takes a stand for children's health. This Healthy by Default policy will support parents' efforts to protect their children's health. Thank you. And really our end goal is to bring this information to you, hopefully in the near future if you approve, and our end goal to get an ordinance passed for the Healthy by Default.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time of the council, is this something you would like to have brought back? Or do you want the city manager to provide us with some information first, and then we can make a determination? Why don't you, can you do that?
Do you prefer that as a discussion item?
Maybe you can just send us some information out to us, and then we can discuss at the next meeting whether we would want to bring that. I don't know what's all associated.
It's an ordinance. So, I mean, the framework is an ordinance where we would be providing law to require jurisdiction, or, fast food and the restaurants to do that. So it is an ordinance-based activity. So if you want this to be a discussion item, give us direction, then we can schedule it that way. I'm just looking at our agenda.
Why don't you look out in one of our meetings and see if we can put it as a study session item or something that we can.
Based on current items, we're probably looking at November. Is that acceptable?
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the other requests are for specific items. So at this time, is there anyone else that would like to speak to the council on a non-agenda item? Okay. Hearing none, we will move to appointments to boards and commissions. We have none this evening. Conflict of interest declaration. Is there anyone on the council that would like to declare a conflict of interest on the consent calendar items or two discussion items? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered routine in nature and will be enacted by a single motion unless otherwise requested by an individual council member or the public for special consideration. Otherwise, the recommendation of staff will be accepted and acted upon by roll call vote. At this time, is there anyone on the council that would like a consent calendar item pulled for further discussion?
Number 6.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone in the audience that would like a consent calendar item pulled for further discussion other than item 6? Okay. Hearing none, I'll bring it back to the council for direction on the other items first.
Move to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, 7, and 8.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have the roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Durossette.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kline.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryno.
Yes.
And Mayor Vierra.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0-1.
Okay, item number 6, resolution number 2017-074, awarding a contract to Toller Manufacturing Company, Inc. for the purchase of 7 bus passenger waiting shelters, authorizing the installation and authorizing the city manager to execute the contract. Vice Mayor Kline?
Well, I pulled this item to make just a verbal comment because, I hope with the construction and installation of 7 passenger pass waiting shelters that it does help to improve our ridership, because just recently StanCog fined the city of Ceres for not meeting their fare box ratio. And so what they did was they took a little bit of revenue away from us for our transportation. And so, with installing these and putting the bus schedules up and what it's supposed to do, I hope it does increase our ridership fare box ratio, and it does help us to at least add, another route on, or to expand what we currently do, because we had, I believe it was 2 routes in the city of Ceres, and now we're down to 1. And we've been taking direction into working on our fare box ratio, and yet StanCog gives you a 3-year period to meet it, and if you don't meet it within those 3 years, they take, some of your revenue money away from you. So with that being said, I hope this does help improve our ridership. So that's the comment I wanted to make.
Okay, do you want to make a motion?
With that, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2017-074.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we have the roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Durossette?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kline?
Yes.
Councilmember Ryno?
Yes.
And Mayor Vierra.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0-1.
Okay, thank you. We have no unfinished business this evening, no public hearings, no new business. We have 2 discussion items. The first is item number 9, the general plan policy direction. Mr. Westbrook.
It appears I've been thrown a curveball, but that's okay. We're going to deal with that. So just to give the council and the audience a little bit of update of where we're at in the general plan process. If you recall back in March, the city council selected a preferred alternative that was really alternative one. It's the exhibit that you see on the screen in front of you. Since that time in March, the consultant's been working on creating the draft of the general plan, in addition to some of the environmental impact report chapters. One of the things that staff wanted to do as we did some of our community outreach, we heard a number of things. Also, there were some council desires, and we wanted to bring back some specific questions regarding policy language so that when we bring the general plan, the draft general plan forward to the city council and for the public's release, we can include some of those policy statements in there. 4 of the things that we heard throughout our outreach and meetings with the council and the planning commission that we wanted to get some specific direction on was agricultural conservation, mitigation, the aesthetics of the signs, Faith Home roadway classification, and undergrounding of overhead utilities. So I'm going to briefly talk on those 4 items, Mayor and Council. We can go one by one, or I can run through all 4 of them. Then you can ask me questions at the end before we open it up to the public. So I'm willing to do it however you'd like.
Why don't you go through all 4, and
Okay.
we can ask your questions, and then I'll open it for the public.
For sure. So the exhibit on the screen, as I mentioned, is the preferred land use alternative for the general plan update. It's important to note that the boundaries that you see on this general plan study area were the boundaries that were adopted with the 1997 plan. It was important to council to keep those boundaries the same. So specifically what changed is some of the land uses within that boundary. Staff, when we did our public outreach, one of the things that we heard, and through surveys and at the street fair, one of the things that we heard was a sentiment from the community for this desire to have some agricultural mitigation. And what that means, I don't know. Folks just were interested in preserving some of our agricultural lands around the city. So we presented some options for the council, and kind of what we're doing is just looking for some general direction here. We don't need specifics. We'll go ahead and go back and craft some policy language that we'll include in the general plan update, so we don't necessarily have to be so specific. The first option for agricultural mitigation, the consideration of an urban growth boundary. Typically what an urban growth boundary does is it adopts, with voter approval, kind of a specified area that would be developed over the next 20 years, or development can only happen within those specific areas. Locally, the city of Newman is the only county, or the city in Stanislaus County, that has one. They have a voter approved that was done in 2015. At this point, they haven't taken any projects forward to LAFCO for annexation consideration, but they will be doing that shortly. So one option for the city of Ceres is perhaps consideration of an urban growth boundary, and maybe using the existing general plan study area or something else we could consider. One of the other options is having kind of a well-defined edge boundary. We have a natural edge boundary in the north with the Tuolumne River. The city of Turlock has kind of a well-defined boundary for their city north of Taylor Road. They have kind of said they're not going to move forward with that. One of the areas that could be considered a well-defined boundary for the city of Ceres is maybe areas east of Faith Home Road as you move towards the city of Houston. So that could be an option that we could consider and get some policy consideration. The last one that staff had kind of brought up was adoption of LAFCO's kind of agricultural preservation policy. In general terms, that really means that when there's a sphere adjustment or an annexation to a city, that there's preservation of 1 acre of equal land within Stanislaus County for every 1 acre developed. Locally, Patterson and Riverbank, I believe, have done kind of an adoption of this 1-to-1 policy consistent with LAFCO. The city of Houston, they went 2-to-1. They were saying we want to do a little more preservation than normal, and so they've adopted a policy at 2-to-1. And so those are kind of some of the options that we've come up with staff in terms of how we could address with some policy language in the general plan update regarding the agricultural mitigation. The second item, one of the things that we had heard repeatedly kind of from the council as we had taken code amendments over the years and presented them, was kind of signage and the aesthetics of signage. We went through a pretty big effort a couple years back to limit the temporary signage that was somewhat not the most aesthetically pleasing. I personally think that our tenant identification signage is pretty good, consistent with what we have in other communities. I think that one of the ways that we could really kind of increase our presence as we work towards the Service and Mitchell interchange is perhaps maybe modernizing and getting some allowances for freeway signage, whether those be billboards, which are currently not permitted, or kind of more along the lines of taller monument signs that announce what would be the Mitchell Ranch Shopping Center, what would ultimately be Ceres Gateway Center. I do think that there's areas there that we could certainly improve on the city sign code. As the council is aware, we won't be doing any code amendments relating to the sign code, et cetera, until after the general plan is adopted, but we would include some policies regarding signage in the policy document. The third one that we wanted to bring up and mention was that we heard a lot of in the public outreach was the classification of Faith Home Road. When the general plan was adopted in 97, Faith Home Road within our general plan study area boundary is designated as an expressway, 6-lane expressway. So it's a pretty big road. The council is aware that there have been efforts started with Stanislaus County taking the lead and with Ceres and with Modesto to kind of start this concept of getting a bridge over the Tuolumne River, connecting Faith Home Road in the south with Garner Road in the north. Some of those preliminary discussions with the county and Modesto have kind of alluded to the fact that they have those Faith Home and Garner as expressways in their general plans, that it's likely not to be that big, that it won't be necessary to have a 6-lane facility. And so there have been some discussions just at the staff level to kind of reduce that to a 4-lane arterial from a 6-lane to a 4-lane. And so the consideration that staff would like to have, some policy consideration perhaps, is if Modesto and or Stanislaus County reduces their standard, then we don't need to keep it a 6-lane expressway. I know currently they're running numbers for that project to ensure that the kind of the traffic impacts associated with the 4-lane versus the 6-lane expressway. And then lastly, one that's been kind of something that the city has dealt with individually over the last 10 years is undergrounding of overhead utilities. And what I mean by that is generally when there's new development in new development areas, be it a subdivision, a large industrial tract, commercial property, the developers of those projects are required to underground any overhead utilities. Primarily it's TID. Where we get into a little bit of an issue is our city has a lot of overhead utilities throughout town. If there's a property that redevelopment has been vacant for quite some time, there's no provision to underground those. The existing general plan, when it was adopted in 1997, suggested that there should be overhead utility undergrounding districts formed. For whatever reason, those never happened, and so we don't have a really good provision of getting that done. How we've administered it over the last 10 years or so has been giving developers options. They can either underground the facilities, they can pay into a district, or they can sign a deferral agreement stating that if the line is undergrounded, that they would contribute their fair share. That's worked pretty well. I think that this evening we're looking for kind of policy direction that either says, no, we would like to under existing overhead utility lines, or only in new developed areas. So those are kind of the asks from staff. We want to make sure that we can include some policy language in that draft general plan, and these are the things that we wanted to make sure we got some direction from City Council on.
Okay. Are there any questions of the staff before I open it up to the public?
No.
Okay.
I do have one. I want to go back to, some of the stuff that you were talking about. The edge boundary. Let's say we decide to take the east boundary at Faith Home Road. Okay? So I'm going to take that. We're going to make the east boundary of Faith Home Road. Then I'm going to jump up to number 3 in Faith Home roadway classification. If the city of Ceres, makes the east boundary at Faith Home Road, what kind of input or what kind of clout do we have about the discussion of Faith Home Road being a 4-lane, 6-lane thoroughfare? Do we have any say-so because it stays in the county and the city of Modesto and County want to do it? Does that cut us out?
I don't think so. Currently, I believe where there are city limits, the city of Ceres has jurisdiction all the way across the roadway to the current edge of pavement. Obviously, if the road's developed and widened, there's going to have to be some arrangement with Stanislaus County and the city of Ceres for the maintenance of that facility. Typically, I'm sure the county would love to give that to us so that we maintain that facility, but that's just the discussion about the hard edge. The council has the ability to say they want to make it a 4-lane arterial versus the 6-lane expressway.
So if we establish land mitigation at 1-to-1, and they start, taking land over there, then it would be up to the county for the land mitigation?
If the property was under this jurisdiction of Stanislaus County, they would regulate development there. With Stanislaus County's adoption of their general plan last year, I think in the fall of 2016, there's some policies that suggest if it's within a mile of a city boundaries, the cities get to say what happens there. And so it's very likely that the city would have a lot of input if anything was to happen on Home Road.
Okay, that's the only.
Any other questions? Okay, at this time, I have 2 speaker cards, so I'll start with the first one is Ray Diaz.
Here we go. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and public. My name is Ray Diaz. I am a property owner at 1906 Faith Home Road. And I have 2 points that I'd like to discuss of what Mr. Westbrook brought up, and they are related. First has to do with the well-defined edge boundary. And I would just like to reinforce my position that the edge boundary not be a hard boundary. The council wisely got rid of the original concept of a industrial track on the east side of Faith Home Road, and my recommendation is to make it a gradual transition approach over there instead of going back to any type of hard boundary type of a thing. Basically, make smart decisions, if you would, when you're addressing that point. Secondly, has to do with the Faith Home Road classification. Certainly revising downward the expansion of size is something that I would support. I'm not a Pollyanna either. I understand you have some very hard decisions to make regarding transportation. And this is something that, again, I hope you make smart decisions on. This actually relates back to the first concept of making soft transitions between the urban area and agriculture area. So please continue to make smart decisions in that area, and I encourage you to do what's right for the public in the whole area. Thank you very much. Is there any questions or anything? Okay, thank you.
So one question. So when, if I understand this right, when you're talking about a gradual transition, you would like to see the east side of Faith Home light industrial?
No, sir. No, sir. I believe there's different concepts that have been proposed, and industrial would be the least favored.
Okay.
I think the other concepts could be, and I think Mr. Westbrook has some where they've talked about maybe larger tracks or something like that that could be developed. But it's a gradual, soft transition instead of anything hard.
And so I think that what Mr. Diaz is talking about is really maybe having ranchette size estate site lots on what would be the east side of Faith Home Road as kind of a transition from the subdivisions to the west.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I have is Patricia Cousins.
Good evening. Patricia Cousins, 3865 Roding Road. I want to applaud and incorporate everything Mr. Diaz, my neighbor, has just said, and not to repeat, but his position is the same as my position. Before I came up here, Mildred Lucas said to me, look at the seal. What does the seal show? What does the seal show? Somebody tell me, what's the seal show? Maybe there's no seal back there.
Shows ag.
What's the seal show?
Ag.
Louder?
Agriculture.
Agriculture, it says City of Ceres, together we achieve. I'm not in the City of Ceres. I have no desire to be in the City of Ceres. But that seal, which is lovely, showcases the agricultural center of this valley. And yet what everyone seems to want to do is just pave it over. And I do agree with Mr. Diaz that 4 is better than 6, but 2 is better than 4. There's no need for acres and acres of more blacktop. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak? Please come up, state your name.
Norm Calkins. My family's been farming the land there, Faith Home and Roding, since 1903. I have seen a lot of different expansions in the City of Ceres. I would like to remind you when you're planning things, if you change the size of Faith Home to anything more than 2 lanes, you are going to just develop that whole area between Ceres and Houston, and it will not be farmland in the next 50 years. All you have to do is look at Carpenter Road. Carpenter Road, I can remember when there was agriculture on both sides of Carpenter Road. Right now, it's solid houses, and there's pressure more to be developed on the outside of Crow's Landing Road. Sorry, wrong road. Mitchell, I can remember when there was agriculture on the east side of Mitchell. Mitchell got turned into a 4-lane road, and what do we have? All kinds of housing, all kinds of everything. The particular area that right there from Roding, Faith Home to south all the way to Keys is presently just a lot of ranchettes, a lot of small farms. And in my opinion, that's the way it should stay. We have a lot of wildlife out in that area that as farmers we actually take care of. We don't shoot, we don't do anything to them. There's coyotes, there's fox, there's raccoons, there's possum, there's a lot of different things floating around out there that are in no other place around here. If you cut that all off. They can't get to the river, which they go down to. There's just a whole lot of different issues in the wildlife there, and would not like to see that whole area developed at all. Questions?
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on these items? Okay. That'll bring it back to the council. So let's start with item number one and kind of give you some direction. The comment I would have is I guess I'm probably more aligned with item number C, which is the adoption of Stanislaus LAFCO's current ag preservation policy that says if there's any development that there needs to be a one-for-one mitigation for ag land.
I do agree.
Well, right now, don't we have a choice? It isn't just the one-for-one. Isn't there, in currently what we have, we can do more than the one-for-one?
There is a menu of options that are included. One for one is the kind of the minimum standard. City of Houston went 2-to-1. So I think the council can elect to adopt the policy as LAFCO has currently written it, or something more stringent.
So if there is a one-for-one because someone is going to develop their property, does that mean that wherever they're taking that one from doesn't necessarily have to be in Ceres? It could be on the west side, correct?
It has to be in Stanislaus County, and it has to be like for like. And what I mean by that, if it's 10 acres of prime farmland that's taken, there has to be preserved 10 acres of prime farmland somewhere in Stanislaus County, but it does not have to be specific to Ceres.
Well, see, I don't like that. I think if there is ag land that was going to be taken and say it was in Ceres, well, then they could say, well, I've got 10 acres in Riverbank, so I'm okay. Isn't that what that's saying?
I hear you, but the challenge with that is the land isn't in Ceres, it's in Stanislaus County. So if they're developing 10 acres in Stanislaus County, it may be near Ceres border, but I don't know how we would say we want it to be. The way we could do that, and the direction that we could give, is if they do their mitigation, then we say that we want it to be within a certain radius of our core city. But right now, the land that they have, that they're putting up is not in the city of Ceres, it's in Stanislaus County.
Okay.
And so LAFCO says it has to stay in Stanislaus County. If we want to ratchet that up and say, okay, anybody who's bringing us a project, before we approve it, we could say, I'm assuming before we approve it, we know what they're putting up for ag mitigation, correct?
Yes, as part of any annexation specific plan, that would be known.
So we could give direction, or staff could say that the policy is we want it to be within a certain radius of it. But then that could be a little bit challenging for them if they do that and they can't find anybody, or that maybe, I mean, I don't know what flexibility it would give them, but those are some of the things we'd have to think of, but that's the direction that they're looking for. It's not an easy question to answer, but my opinion, and again, I'm only one up here, if someone is taking prime farmland in Stanislaus County, I'm okay with it being in Stanislaus County. Now, if they were saying it was going to be in Merced or San Joaquin County, that's different, but that's just my opinion.
With that statement being made, I got a question. So let's say the city of Patterson has the one-for-one, and a guy's got 10 acres. Then he wants to develop it, and he's got somebody in the city of Ceres sphere of influence that's willing to give him those 10 acres. But yet, it's 10 acres that we had set aside for an industrial park, let's just say over there by Stanislaus Farm Supply. Do we, because it's in our sphere of influence, do we have any say?
I don't believe we do. That would be a transaction between property owners.
Yeah, we have that is a private, the granting of an easement is how that's preserved, and we do not have the authority to supersede that property owner's right to preserve his property. So he can do that however they they so choose. That's private property rights.
But, okay, with
We
that
only
being
have
said.
zoning, we're not changing the zoning, that zoning stays. So all that, we wouldn't have any ability to change that action.
With that being said, then let me understand Mayor Vieira's point then. If somebody in the city of Ceres wants to develop 10 acres and it's prime farmland, we do have an option by telling or making the comment that we want it within a certain sphere of influence of Ceres, that land is preserved?
Well, I don't think we didn't do that with Whitmore Ranch, did we?
Whitmore Ranch isn't done just yet, but this would be something that would be a policy consideration. So if the council, it sounds like the council would like to maybe explore a policy, that's something that could be drafted in the policy that suggests it has to be within 5 miles of the city limits or whatever it may be. And I think that what Mayor Vieira is suggesting is most property that's going to be preserved is going to be within Stanislaus County, just because that's where it's most plentiful. It doesn't fall within the jurisdictions of any of the cities.
At this point, really all we're looking for, if you're getting a little bit deep into the weeds at this point, you really just need to say, yes, we would prefer to pursue an ag mitigation policy, and we can come back with some options as part of the general plan. I mean, if you have some ideas of exactly what you'd like to do, we can go there, but we don't have to decide tonight that it is specific with radius. We hear what you're saying, but you just say that we want to head down the direction of an ag mitigation policy, and we can incorporate some concepts into the draft policy.
Well, I think we need to pursue an ag mitigation policy, but just how is it defined is going to be an item of discussion.
So again, what we're looking for is a framework. If we stay with LAFCO's direction, it's pretty well defined already. But if you want to go more restrictive than that, then we're going to get that's probably a whole detailed conversation we need to get into. So that's kind of the direction we're looking for. You don't have to we don't have to define everything this evening. We just kind of need to narrow the focus of what we can include in that draft document.
But right now, there's a menu, so there isn't just one specific item, correct?
Correct.
And staff doesn't like having a menu? You want it to be one specific?
No, LAFCO's policy is there's a menu of options.
Right.
Typically, the developments that have gone forward through LAFCO do the one-to-one. So there's a menu of options. We can adopt the policy and still have the benefit of those same menu options. It's just typically the easiest one to achieve is the one-to-one mitigation.
And also recognize that LAFCO policy could change in the future, right? We're setting a general plan policy for a 20-year document. If LAFCO changes their policy, we have to be recognizing that potential change as well.
And I think some of the other options here would be, yes, it might be difficult for someone to get voter approval, but if they get voter approval, then there's no ag preservation.
And that is an option under LAFCO. That UGB is one of the listed options under LAFCO's policy.
So I guess the question is, because I'm hearing it, do we want to have the agricultural preservation policy?
I think we need to have an agricultural preservation policy.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's the direction that we would like, which is item C. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, the aesthetics and signage. I think on this item, I think we need to open up our options here. I think that right now we don't have a lot of, or don't provide you with a lot of options. I think that, the way I understand the policy, if somebody has an old decrepit sign, they can't go in and put in a new one. And I think that needs to change a little bit. So I feel that we should provide you with the ability to go back and bring back some policy directions on that.
But I can see a problem with limited A-frame signs for downtown if we don't allow them anywhere else, and say the Richland Shopping Center, and then all of a sudden we're going to say, well, it's okay, we can have a limited number downtown. I think that can create problems in the city. I think if no one is supposed to have A-frame, then I don't believe the downtown area should either.
The downtown also pays another fee, though. The owners down there, depending on the size of their building, correct? That McDonald's wouldn't have to pay a yearly fee for the downtown.
They do pay an assessment. I wouldn't call it a significant amount.
But it's something that's different.
But it's associated with their maintenance.
Right. I agree with the mayor. I think that, we don't necessarily want to be real limited. Sorry for cutting you off, by the way. I've had a cold. I apologize. And again, I know we had this conversation when I first got on the council in 2008, electronic billboard signs, off the freeway. I've seen these in Sacramento and Stockton. I think they look great. Great advertisement, great money for the city. But,
So is your question, do we want to keep it the way it is, or do we want to refresh it? Is that the question?
I think that it certainly needs a refreshing.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good policies in our sign code, and when we're at the conclusion of the general plan, then we'll be getting into a code update. I think for me, where I would like to see us maybe press is some opportunities around the Service Mitchell interchange with some better signage than we would have currently today.
Correct. And I can support that.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. The Faith Home roadway classification, I personally have no problem going from the 6-lane expressway to the 4-lane arterial.
Currently, it's 6.
In the existing general plan, it's shown as a 6-lane expressway, yes.
And by going 4 and it's going to be arterial, that still means that we can have the truck traffic on it?
Yes.
Correct. And it's actually that designation from an environmental analysis standpoint for our general plan is in essence the worst case scenario, meaning it will show the most impacts from an environmental standpoint. So if we were to say it's a 4-lane arterial and for some reason it changes to a 4-lane expressway, those transportation impacts are less, right? So you're studying the worst case at a 4-lane arterial from a traffic standpoint. So it's safer in the respective study for moving forward the general plan.
So if it were to become a 4-lane arterial and truck traffic, I guess it's anticipated for the truck traffic to go to Beard Industrial, is that correct?
Correct.
So we no longer have the on-ramp at Faith Home, so where are these trucks going to, where do they go?
The county's plan is Keys Road. The Faith Home connects to Keys and then signalized intersection of Keys and the off-ramps. So your connectivity would be at Keys. That's the current plan. It's a straight shot.
You want to leave it at 6?
Oh, gosh, no.
Oh, okay.
No.
And here's the deal. I've had long discussions with Mr. Wells on Faith Home Road. I've had long discussions with a couple of council members of the city of Modesto because they're trying to get me on board because I'm on the STANCOG about Faith Home Road Expressway. Okay? And I have a really difficult time with increasing it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Number one is I'm a little biased because I was raised out there on Faith Home in Whitmore. My grandparents had the old Victorian house that the Voss bought the property and they tore the house down. And I was raised out there. The other thing is I do have a commercial commercial license, and thinking that trucks are going to go from Beard Industrial across the bridge at Faith Home and take Faith Home all the way to Keys, make a left-hand turn at Keys and Faith Home, and come back to the freeway to get on the freeway to go north or southbound, okay, I can't see that happening. That's me personally. I can't see it happening because, number one, it's more fuel for them. Number two, it's out of their way. They're going to come over Faith Home Road. Come over the bridge, get to Faith Home and Hatch. They're going to make a right-hand turn and they're going to go straight down Hatch Road to the freeway. That's the quickest route. I've had discussions with Mr. Wells. He doesn't, me and him really don't see eye to eye on that thing because that's just logic and everything like that. With the stop signs that are out there, they're not going to want to shift gears. They're not going to want to do anything. You have all the farmers out there. You have everybody with their farm equipment. When it's peach season, almond season, things like that. I have a very difficult time personally even supporting it to go to 4 lanes. That's me personally. And it is because of what that area is designated and everything that it stands for. Because I have relatives that have a trucking company.
Well, I would agree with you, too, that I don't believe the trucks are going to go all the way down to Keys. When they get to Hatch, they're going to want to make that right. They're going to want to get on the...
And if they want to go southbound, they're going to go all the way down, they're going to turn right onto Service Road and hit service to Whitmore. Service to Mitchell and get on the freeway right there. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm thinking too much outside of a box and not so much of what people think that it's going to happen, but I really think it's going to be very difficult to force the trucks. Because right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mitchell Road is not a truck route.
Mitchell Road is a truck route.
From all the way to the freeway?
All the way to the freeway.
Okay.
I think the best thing that you could do, Vice Mayor Kline, is you said on StanCog, the best thing you could try to do is advocate for the county not to build the bridge.
Well, Tom,
Because once they build the bridge, they're not going to build it for 2-lane roadway. So I hear what you're saying, but you probably have the biggest hammer. If they don't have the bridge, they don't need 4 lanes. So,
Tom, what is the benefit to the city and the residents to have that be an expressway?
Versus the 6-lane to the 4-lane?
Or like Councilmember Vice Mayor Kline is saying?
It gets the trucks off of Mitchell Road.
Okay, but I would agree with him that they're not going to proceed south all the way to Keys Road. They're not going to.
but if there's, the only thing I would say is if I'm a truck driver and I have Hatch Road and all the stoplights, and I have Faith Home and no stoplights, I'm probably going to go Faith Home.
So they're going to eliminate...
I'm not advocating, I'm just saying that's what I would think would happen.
But then my question is, they're going to eliminate all the stop signs? There's like I want to say 4 or 5 stop signs from Faith Home and Hatch all the way to Keys Road.
As an expressway, you wouldn't have stop signs in an expressway. You would generally have traffic control situation, limited intersections.
So I guess the direction is, you were asking if we should go from 6 to 4. The answer is 4, yes. Okay?
Expressway versus arterial?
No, arterial.
Or arterial.
4-lane arterial, not expressway.
But it's kind of a mixture from a hearing down there?
Well, I don't know
I say no. I say 2-lane.
I agree with Vice Mayor Kline.
So if you say 2 lanes, so you're saying you want to leave the truck traffic on Mitchell Road?
Yes.
Okay, that's a significant change to the environmental document, a significant change to our 1997 general plan. That's a complete different analysis and completely different of any direction we've had thus far.
Well, so if it's 2-2, then it stays 6 lanes.
Again, this is draft for our draft general plan. So we're just looking for what we're going to include in the draft general plan as it gets circulated. So there's still plenty of opportunity for a final decision to be made here. We were just hoping to try and narrow some of those decision points.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we were just trying to bring this forward so that we could talk about it ahead of the release of the general plan, but there's no reason to say that we couldn't address it at that time either.
Again, from our recommendation, from an environmental standpoint, our recommendation would be included as a 4-lane arterial, so it can be studied at that level. And if it goes, if it goes to 2 lanes and it doesn't change, then that's a different level analysis. But if there's any opportunity, that's the better way to study it.
So right now, it'll be studied as 6 lanes.
6-lane expressway.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, you'll have overkill. At least the study will be there. But does that also impacts our traffic impact fees too?
Well, it changes the fees, and it also changes kind of how particular traffic is shown and which intersections may or may not be impacted. But I think with this conversation, we can probably direct them to model it both ways, so we'd have that information available.
All right.
Regardless
So do you
of
have enough
decisions.
information on this
I
one?
believe
then?
so. Yeah.
Okay. Then the last one is the undergrounding of the overhead utilities. I believe I would say that we stick with the policy of undergrounding on new. I don't think anybody's going to be running up to underground existing.
Well, the challenge on that is what to do with those kind of in-between situations since we don't have the districts formed. We've got several folks who have kind of bought out or paid out of that program. So without that district in place, we're in a kind of limbo land of how to apply those dollars to the underground of those facilities when we've got some challenges with TID and what to do. So it makes it difficult for staff on what to do with those monies when folks who pick one of those 3 options when they buy out. How do you make that determination where to spend those monies? And that's where we kind of need some direction.
What if they were to underground in their project frontage?
Well, that's the problem. You know, for example, this policy was created back on the Rite Aid on Mitchell Road. So they've got frontage there, a couple hundred feet, and there's 2 power poles. To underground their frontage, you still had to put up 2 power poles to underground it. So you had to come down a pole, go underground, and come back up a pole. So your net result was you spent several $100,000 and didn't underground anything. I mean, you underground the frontage, but you end up with the same amount of poles, and that's the problem we run into in these infill type of situation when you aren't able to do a long stretch, and the likelihood of Mitchell Road being undergrounded is pretty minimal. So, kind of looking for, do you want a more of a comprehensive program where we kind of look at areas and say these are areas where we want it to be underground, or you would give staff the flexibility to have now? It just makes it a little more cumbersome, to deal with these kind of one-off situations that tend to come up more often than we'd like.
Me personally, I would think I'd leave it to staff on practicality. It's not what you want to hear.
Right, that's the problem, right?
So-
We get into that situation. That's the
So is
difficulty.
Mitchell Ranch, that's not considered infill?
Correct.
That's a new development,
Yep.
so it would all
Yeah,
be
those are
underground?
The
Okay.
greenfield developments are really easy. It's really clear. But, for example, like Whitmore, west of Morgan Road by the McDonald's, that area to the west there, as that develops, those overhead utilities be required to be undergrounded. Well, when Dollar General came in, it's not feasible for them to underground, 100 feet of frontage. So they kind of bought out of there. So we have a $60,000 kind of deposit towards the undergrounding. And, who knows when that gets undergrounded because it's relative to development. So that creates some of a challenge there. But if you guys if the policy works for council, then staff will continue implementing it. It's an opportunity to review that policy to see whether that's working for council.
Who wants to keep the policy? I say keep the policy.
I do too.
I'm okay with it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we will move on to water rate study.
I know.
It hasn't worked for anybody, so I'm not sure it's going to.
Was there a break in between each one?
No.
So good evening. Mayor and council members, tonight we are bringing you the water rate study presentation with our consultants HF&H. HF&H has been performing our studies since 2008, 2009. This is their 4th study. And with this study, our goal is to build a sustainable water system for the future for the city of Ceres. I turn it over to John Farnkoff and Rick Simonson from HF&H, and it's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, staff. It's a pleasure to be here. I see a few familiar faces. It has gone back to 2008. What I will do right now is is this coming through okay? I will just kind of tee things up for my colleague Rick Simonson to take you through the analysis. What we're going to present to you tonight is first just a little bit of background, which I'll cover, and then Rick is going to go through the revenue projections and the revenue requirements, talk to you about the reserve funds. we'll talk about the recommended rate adjustments, and he'll finish with the customer bill impacts, and then I'll talk about connection fees before we wrap things up. What we're trying to do here tonight is just provide information. This is not a voting item or anything. So this is an opportunity for you and the public to learn about what the next 5 years is beginning to look like here. And you'll get an opportunity to hear from the public if they have anything to say tonight, and we'll get an opportunity to hear from you as well. So as Jeremy was saying, we started working on water rates for the city back in 2008, and that seems like a long time ago. That was at a time when the council met down the street a block away in a room that is about as big as this carpeted area. Since then, a lot has happened here in the city. At that time, we were doing rate work as part of the master plan that was developed. There were a lot of system deficiencies. There was low pressure. There were water quality issues, and the residential customers were unmetered. And a lot has been accomplished since then. In those days, people were paying about 50 cents a day for water for all they could use. Water, that was not a sustainable rate, of course, and with the results of the master plan, the rates have gone up. Services, of course, improved, but you're not completely through the woods. There's been a lot of heavy lifting done in terms of the council's commitment to increasing rates, but as Rick is going to talk to you, there's still more ahead, unfortunately. So the last the last time we came before you was in November of 2012 with the series of rate increases that you adopted. The last one of those was adopted just recently in July. During that time, the metering was completed. Everybody went on to consumption-based rates. That coincided with a shortage period. People had to cut back. There were penalties. It was a difficult period of time. The city has also continued its planning effort with Turlock on the regional surface water supply project, which could be as much as $100 million commitment by the city. And that is something now that is built into the planning for the next 5 years rate increases. So I think with that introduction, let me turn over Rick's part of the presentation on the rates, and I'll finish up with the connection fees.
Good evening, council members. Again, Rick Simonson with HF&H, and I've put together a few slides, 4 or 5 slides, just to give you an overview, a summary level of what goes into setting rates. This first slide I prepared is the initial phase is looking at your revenue and expense projections. What's the revenue requirement? And typically we look at 5 years, but you have some unique circumstances. As John mentioned, the regional surface water supply project will be a significant cost at $100 million for your share. So we've extended this 5-year planning period that we typically do to a 10-year planning period. So I apologize for the small font trying to fit on these slides, but I'll just walk through some of the highlights of what this slide is telling us. The bar chart, the stacked bar chart, those are your expenses. These are the revenue requirements. What does your revenue need to cover? We start with your typical day-to-day operating and maintenance expenses. That's your salaries and benefits, your overhead costs, your building costs, just to run the system. And that's the blue bar at the bottom. Then on top of that, you have some other partnerships, the Integrated Regional Water Management Partnership with the City of Modesto, as well as Houston and Turlock. You're also a partner in the Stanislaus Regional Water Authority. You have some commitments there, some cost sharing, and that's the green on top of that blue. And just above that green, we have some costs for a recent bond issuance to pay for some water system improvements. You have an obligation to pay. That's about $300,000 a year. So these are the priorities as we're setting rates. We need to cover at least these costs. And on top of this, we have our capital costs. And I've put them into 2 different sections. One, the purple, that's about $5 million per year for the first 5 years, and it goes down to about $4 million per year for the second 5 years. This is what we call your pay-go capital, your pay-as-you-go. It's part of the rates. You're not issuing a bond to pay for it, which is the case. You're not debt funding it, which is the case with the orange, which is the debt service for the loan for the regional surface water supply project. And that is stacked on top of the purple, and that is out a few years. The project's to begin in January 2020, take 2 to 3 years to complete. The first few years, the first 4 years of the orange bar is just paying the interest payments. You do not need to pay on the principal until the project's complete and 1 year later, and that's why it grows there in those last 4 years up to about $4.7 million per year. So that's why we looked at all 10 years. We wanted to make sure we had that full cost of this $100 million commitment within this rate study. And what I've also shown on here is the dotted black line. Those are your current revenues at current rates. If rates did not change over that 10-year period, you'll see anything above that line would be unfunded. You wouldn't have the funds to pay for those. It's not just the capital. By the time you get out in the 4th or 5th year, you can't even make your debt service payments. So this is just an overview visually of your revenues and expenses and what we contemplate when we move forward in suggesting some rate increases. I provided this slide just a little detail because of that purple and those orange bars. That's your most significant cost. It's your capital improvement projects, and this is the pay-go projects. I'm not going to go line by line. This is just give you an overview of what makes up that $5 million in the first 5 years. Most significantly, your wellhead treatment at the well to get these wells up to standards. It's about $10 million over the next 5 years, so that's adding $2 million to your capital improvement projects on an annual basis. So this is a very significant cost that's having a dramatic impact in your revenue requirement. So once we understand what your expenses are, what your current rates are at current revenues, we plot and suggest some recommended rate increases. And what this chart is showing is not only with your rate revenue, you do have reserves. And what's depicted here is at the end of 16-17, your reserves in the water enterprise are just over $6 million. So not only rates can fund these shortfalls that I showed on the previous bar chart, but you have reserves to help pay for some of that. So what we've done here was some recommended rate increases, and these are effective January 1 of each year in this rate study, which is 6 months into each fiscal year period. So when you look at the 40% rate increase, you will realize only 20% increase in your revenue because the fiscal year starts in July and this is a January 1 increase. So I just want to clarify that in case it was a bit confusing in the report. So just back to the graph with the reserve fund at about just over $6 million. That first year with the 40% rate increase, we're still dipping into reserves. So that 40% could be something higher, but we do have reserves available, so let's draw on those as we can. And in order to know where reserves it's prudent to have, you don't want to dip too low. We have a minimum balance. And in the industry, the typical minimum balance is about 2 months of operating expenses, which would be about $1 million a year. That's to keep the lights on, keep everything running. Your revenues don't come in as exactly how you spend your money, so you want some cushion. It's like a checking account. You want to make sure there's enough money in there to pay your bills. So that's the red line. Then we have a target on top of that is capital. It's prudent and industry practice to have a year's pay-go expenses, which is about $5 million. So that's why your target is around $6 million, about 6.5 by the time we get out to the end of the 10th year. So those are the constraints that we're working with, your reserve balance, and then how much we need to increase your revenue. So we've plotted out some rate increases and shown the ending fund balance at each year. For the first 4 years, we're drawing down on those reserves, so we don't have to increase rates quite as much. And then we can level off in the last 5 or 6 years, something closer to inflation. And what rates are we talking about here? So with the water rates, you do have 2 types of charges. We have a fixed service charge. Each meter, each customer has a meter that's supplying the water, and they're charged a fixed amount per month, regardless of how much water is used on that meter. And it doesn't depend on what type of customer you are, residential or commercial. Everybody pays based on the size of their meter. The second charge is water usage. So as you use more water, you're charged for that additional usage. And it does vary each month. You may use 10,000 gallons this month and only 4,000 gallons the next month. So this charge on your bill varies from month to month. And currently, single-family customers have 2 tiers, from 0 up to 75,000 gallons in a month. That's tier 1. Anything above 75,000 gallons is tier 2. And currently, it's less than 2% of the bills get into that second tier. So very few bills get into that second tier. And then non-single family or multifamily and commercial customers, there are no tiers. There's the flat rate per 1,000 gallons used. And we're not proposing any changes to that current structure. So what do the rates look like? So I plotted out here the next 5 years. We're not looking to set rates. These are just proposed for the full 10 years. We're just looking at 5 years. 40% increase for January 1 would increase a 1-inch meter or smaller. Most of your customers, 95% of your customers have a 1-inch or smaller meter. And actually 99% of your single-family customers have 1-inch meter or smaller. Would increase about $8 a month in that first year. And the volumetric charges are shown below, the tier 1 and tier 2 for single family, and then the non-single family uniform rate. Put together a few sample bill impacts. The average single family water use is 10,000 gallons per month, so I plotted that here first. The increase from the $20 to $28 for the fixed meter charge is shown there. And the volumetric portion with the 10,000 gallons would increase to about $28, so increasing the monthly bill about $16 in that first year. And again, a $20 increase January 1, 2019, and then around $4 each month thereafter for 2020, 21, and 22. I've also shown average water use for a non-single family. Tracks fairly close to that, about a $24 monthly increase in the first year, $31, and then around $5 per month thereafter. And you do have some single-family customers that use above water use, so I did plot that here, just to give you some context for what that can mean to some of your larger commercial customers. And that only makes up about 12% of your non-single-family customers would be considered above average. In addition, I plotted against comparing you to other jurisdictions within your area. Currently, the 2 far left bars are the current and then the proposed increase for the average 10,000 gallons per month for the single family bills. It would increase to $56 for the city. And at the $40, you were less than some and you were more than some. And that would remain true if you went up to the $56.18, though you would be just less than Stockton and Lathrop and something greater than the others. And this, of course, is what we're proposing for January 1, 2018. We don't know what the other jurisdictions may be doing January 1st or most typically July 1st of next year. Also plotted the 20,000 gallons for a non-single family. That's the average for a 3/4 inch commercial customer. Again, it's similar. You're greater than some and less than some, and even with the increase, that will remain true. And I plotted the non-single family as well, and this relationship remains the same even with your high water use customers. Still less than some, but greater than most. So I'll turn this over. Those are the water rates. In addition, we looked at connection fees, and John will give you a little more context for what a connection fee is and what we're recommending there.
Before going on to connection fees, it might be good to take any questions or thoughts you have right now on water rates.
Sure, I just had a couple of questions for you. The charts that the two you had before, that's what they would projected to be in the future, or is that what they are today, or how does that compare?
That's what they are today, with the exception of Turlock. That's an estimate for them as well.
So the 5618, though, is our projected future.
For January 1, 2018, that's correct, and it's being compared to current today for the
Okay. So these could go up for theirs a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, and then the other comment I would make is this includes the surface water project, not necessarily if we stayed status quo and we're looking at treatment of our existing water system.
That's correct. It does include everything.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? No? Okay.
All right, connection fees. These are charges that people who are connecting to the system for the first time pay. So this is not really something that affects ratepayers at all, although the revenue from connection fees is additional revenue into the water fund that can be used to cover costs. The last time we looked at connection fees, we were building in the master plan projects, the growth-related portion of the master plan projects, and that increased the connection fee from, I believe it was $4,985 to the current $6,697, and it stayed in place since we updated that a few years ago. There was no escalation. So what you see in this are really two components of the connection fee. The current component for the local master plan projects, which is the $6,697. And what we're recommending here is that you escalate that number over time to cover the cost of construction cost inflation. And that would be for the local part of the system, the master plan projects that you have. Now, the regional surface water project, as it starts to enter the picture, it will be debt service. It won't be pay-as-you-go projects, which the local projects are. And so the pricing theory here that applies in setting these connection fees is connection fees have to bear a reasonable relationship between the amount of the connection fees and the facilities that benefit growth. And the way we do that is we treat the connection fee as a charge that growth pays to reimburse ratepayers for the costs that ratepayers bear to provide the capacity for growth. And in the case of the regional surface water project, those costs will be the cumulative debt service that they pay. So the regional surface water project may be, in total, a construction cost of $100 million, but that will be built with borrowed funds. And so ratepayers, it wouldn't be reasonable for a developer to reimburse ratepayers immediately for $100 million when most of it was borrowed. So instead, to keep that increment of the cost, the regional surface water project cost, reasonable, we build it in as the ratepayers start to pay the debt service on the $100 million. And so that's why you see it start out relatively low there, January 1st of 2020, and it's starting to grow. Eventually it will amount to a very substantial amount. In effect, what your current fee is covering are projects that are related to about $100 million in local master plan projects. With the regional project, if it turns out to be $100 million, when you add financing costs, the interest costs, you would expect that component eventually to be considerably more than the local component. But for right now, we're showing you what these numbers would look like for the next 5 years and how the increment of the surface water project would add to it.
Question for you: if we get grant funding as a part of the process, these rates could go down.
Correct, yeah. In essence, what's being proposed here this evening for your consideration would be the worst-case scenario if we were to secure any level of funding, or if the project's timing of capital improvements delays at all, then those rates could be lowered, depending on timing. So this, again, paints the picture of, in essence, the worst case, and we can always, the council would have the ability, if something changes, with the next rate increase, you'd have the ability to set the rates lower than what's approved here. This basically sets the cap.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions, or is that at the end of the presentation? Or?
That's the end of the presentation. Okay. With the exception of, I don't know, if, Jeremy, do you want me, or would you like to cover the next steps here? All right. So what we're presenting to you right now is the recommended rate increases with the assumptions that Rick's talked about. The process here, the next steps would be to initiate the requirements, the procedural requirements under Proposition 218, what you would do is you would authorize staff to mail a notice to ratepayers, which starts a 45-day, what's referred to as the protest period. And during that time, people can decide whether or not they want to protest. If they do protest, it's a protest in writing, and there are instructions on how to protest. If you receive 50% plus one of the affected parcels or ratepayers protesting, the city can't increase the rates. And I forgot to check how many.
About 6,000.
It's about 6,000 protests that you would need. So you'd mail the notices, and at least 45 days later, you'd have a protest hearing, and that would close the protest period. And at that time, the council can decide how much to increase rates. The rates can be increased up to, but no greater than the rates that are contained in the notice. In the plan, I think, is to have rates effective by January 1st, and I hope the city attorney, you can please correct me if you need to.
I would concur and just add that it's up to 5 years per Prop 218.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any questions to staff before I open it up to the public for public comment?
One thing I failed to say is that the rates are subject to Proposition 218, but the connection fees are not.
And the only thing about the connection fees is we do need to do some outreach to the BIA as a developer impact fee. There is part of that process which we do once the council accepts this study, then we would do that outreach before those fees are effective. It's kind of a parallel path, but we would do that separately.
Okay, so again, the action tonight is to accept the study, then it'll come back to us, and then we will set the rates based upon.
Actually, not necessarily accepting the study. We're looking for any comments, directions, so we can finalize the study. So the study is an S draft. This is your first review of it. There's issues, things that we need to correct so we can finalize this study. We present the final study for your acceptance on the 25th, and then there'd be a resolution that you'd be adopting directing us to start the process. And the dates that are mentioned there, the 27th is a little bit of flexibility for November. The 45 days would actually be closer to November 13th if we could get there to that, but it's all relative to when the notices go out. But that's the time frame to try and get that in place so that the rates can be effective by January 1.
Okay. Vice Mayor Kline?
I just have questions for staff. 2009 bond, $300,000 a year. When is that paid off?
Suzanne, you may know that answer. I want to say 2030.
It's a 30-year bond, is my recollection.
Okay, so yeah, it's going to be 2039 from when we sold those bonds.
Okay. And the other thing, I've never built a house, so what's entitled for a connection fee? If I come into the city and I pay my permits to get a connection fee, what does the city do for me for my $6,000 or $7,000 to connect the water?
Well, the connection fee is tied to the system capacities and infrastructure. So all the treatment, everything that goes along with delivering of the water.
Yeah,
so it's your pro rata share. Think of it this way: it's your proportionate share of the cost of the system, right? So if you were to value this system today, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. So when a new connection goes in, you're paying your proportionate share of that overall cost. That's what you're getting: the ability of that whole system to deliver you water to your front door when you turn the tap on. It's got to be proportionate and shared across the whole system. That's the way this fee program works. It allows everyone to, mutually benefit from the investment that's been made in this community over, nearly 100 years.
So I understand there's always a cost to it. But where I wrestle at with the connection fees is, when I first got on the council, I got with Mr. Westbrook and we did a thing on building permits and all the fees. And then I look at the staff report on permits that were pulled and different things like that. And then I say, okay, no building permit was pulled, recently. So it's like, okay, but everywhere else, everybody's building. Are we just going to price ourselves out of the market with our fees?
I would say our fees are still lowest third within the county, Stanislaus County, at least lowest half. Fees generally have been proven over and over again are not a driving factor of the overall cost of building a house. They are a component. Generally speaking, they're in the range of 10% of the overall cost of building a new home. It's part of what's required to ensure that development pays its fair share.
That's usually not a driving factor in the homes. I can tell you because I deal with all of them.
I understand.
They look at much more different things than the water fee. So, any other questions? All right, at this time, I will open it up to the public to see if there's anyone that would like to comment on the rate study, the draft rate study. Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. So again, just to summarize, you're looking for direction or us indicating to move forward with this report as is.
Yeah, any impacts or any things that we should address or adjust in that study before we make our final presentation in 2 weeks.
Are there any comments or direction? Do we need a just direction or a vote?
Just direction. Don't need a vote this evening.
Okay, I'm okay with it. Okay. I mean, it's painful, but yes.
Well, that's what I was going to say, that I hate the idea of 40%, but yet we have to pay for it too. I mean, we live in the city, and I understand why we are. I just don't think it's going to be easy for us to accept that. That's all. I mean, I understand why we need to pay for it, so.
Yeah. So you're okay with the report?
Well,
I mean, for them to finalize it?
Well, of course, yes.
Okay. All right, with that, council member referrals, Councilmember Ryno, anything?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Vice Mayor Kline?
I don't have a referral, but I do have a question. I drive by Smyrna Park every day, the Little League Park.
Costa.
And why is the grass so brown? All of a sudden, I mean, there are tournaments going on. I mean, it's like, did somebody turn the water off? Well, Costa Fields. I mean, field number 2.
Costa Fields, when we set the new agreement in place with Costa Fields, they took over the irrigation for their system. So we spent a lot of time and effort in building a control system to where it's separated. Our own internal parks division has access and controls Smyrna. They control Costa. They have the same control schemes that we do. They have magnitudes of issues.
But what bothers me is years ago, the city of Ceres spent a great deal of money, okay, on Costa Fields. And I drive by there every day, and the last couple of days, I mean, after all that money that was spent, and now you got nothing but dry grass. I mean, it's a shame. I mean, I sat up here when I first got elected, and, you know, when my kids were playing, the fields were open. We could go out there and use it anytime we wanted to. Then when the city council prior to me spent this money, they locked it up. You can't use it without permission, and you got to get a key. And now, after all that stuff, it's an eyesore. I mean, it is horrendous.
I think that needs to be factored into the evaluation when their contract comes up. If they're going to run our asset into the ground, then maybe they aren't entitled to use it.
I mean, we just had a park study not too long ago, and Councilmember Ryno brought in pictures of everything, and now all of a sudden you got, I mean, I don't even know how much money the city spent on that park.
Yeah, I drove by it as well.
And it's like, you know what, if I can you please get with CYB as soon as possible and see what's going on?
We can do it tomorrow.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
It's all staff time.
Councilmember Durossette?
Nothing.
All right, I have nothing to report, nothing referrals as far as reporting. Councilmember Ryno, anything to report? Vice Mayor Kline?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No, I have nothing either. Suzanne?
I just wanted to take a moment to thank the public for their patience. So when our software was down for 2 days last week, you guys were very patient with us, and we really, really appreciate it. We will be talking in the future about building in redundancy into our system so that we don't ever face this again.
Sure. Okay, Tom?
Toby?
A couple items. As was indicated at our last council meeting, the resignation of Mr. Shepard has created a vacancy on the Measure H committee. We've ran that article or the ad in the Series Courier, as well as put it on our website for that application period. Will run through September, accepting applications for that Measure H committee. We have just initiated a process for a community-wide yard sale to be held here in the community center parking lot. That's scheduled for October 7th. It's a joint venture with the Ceres Chamber of Commerce. It's on their website currently. We'll be getting it up on ours. The opportunity that we'll be raising money for the scholarship fund for here in the community center. So look forward to more information on that item. The Centennial Committee continues to meet. We'll be meeting tomorrow evening here in the community center at 5:30. The public is welcome to that as well. And we are continuing to work with ACE, and there's a outreach meeting tomorrow with some of the businesses in the area. So let you know we'll continue to work on that.
Tom?
Nothing, Mayor.
Daryl?
Downtown 4th Street's continuing as scheduled. Most of our concrete's in now. About 90% of the sidewalks are in. We're still progressing on that. Electrical lights have been installed this last week, so those are still being completed over the next week or so. But we do appreciate those who are still using our businesses downtown, and they are still open, so please continue to do that.
Okay. Brent?
Coffee with a cop tomorrow.
Okay. Rich, anything?
Thanks, guys. Just a couple quick things. If you didn't get a chance to know, we did send a couple of, actually didn't send, I'll take that back. We had 2 of our firefighters volunteer their services to assist in the recovery efforts in and around the Houston area. Just want to compliment their efforts and their commitment to just help people. They were there for about 3 days in their own personal time, their own personal equipment and boats, and helped a lot of people and animals and the local government do what they needed to do. We did just have a piece of apparatus returned from the Mission Fire just south of Merced. They were there for about 6 days and helped in the efforts with CAL FIRE to prevent that fire from spreading, and with a little help from Mother Nature. That fire didn't get too big, so they did return home safely without any incident. We also have Fire Prevention Month coming up, so we'll start seeing all the companies and the fire engines at the schools throughout Ceres and some of the surrounding areas to continue to hit our efforts from educating kids from kindergarten through 3rd grade, which we've been doing for upwards of 20-something years now. And then just a reminder that our breast cancer awareness efforts are going to continue in October this year, so we'll be seen around in pink shirts. Hopefully we can see you guys all in them too. So thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy? Nothing. Okay, with that, we will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting, which will be Monday, September 25th, 2017 at 6 p.m. Thank you.